Army of Darkness is definitely the most meme-ish out of all the Evil Dead movies. Like, the first movie took itself pretty seriously, but it still had somewhat, like, goofy moments. The second one is basically the perfect mix, in my opinion, of camp, while still being a horror movie and treating itself as a horror movie. And then Army of Darkness just completely abandons the horror and just turns into a YouTube poop. Literally just says, you know what? We'll keep the gore, you know, the gore. Gore is a big word. We'll keep, like, the dead people walking around, the cool shots, the VFX, but, you know, the horror, we're good on that. We're gonna let go. With any other franchise, the jarring shift would be weird, but with these movies, they're so different from one another, and it's like, I'm not even mad at this. It's just a natural progression of the story at this point. If anything, I'd be more surprised if an Evil Dead movie kept the same tone as the one right before it, because it's kind of the thing with this series, just the tone shift every other movie, or every movie, just straight up. Also, every Evil Dead seemingly has to ignore the last one existed to a certain extent. And I know that has to do with like licensing and rights and stuff like that, but it's just kind of funny because this series is just a big ass mess when you think about it, in the best way possible. It's a fun mess, but it really is just a big ass mess from one movie to the next. So obviously this movie starts with a retelling of the previous movie's events, but not to the extent that Evil Dead 2 does with Evil Dead 1, aka retconning it. Because at least in Army of Darkness, they acknowledge that Evil Dead 2 exists, and it happens, it's a direct sequel, but it just retcons the very end of Evil Dead 2 to change the setup a little bit, which honestly was for the best, because these nights look like shit at the end of the second movie. So props to the costume department, and the increased budget that I'm sure helped them. The story goes like this. After being transported to the past by the Necronomicon, Ash is sentenced to death by some knights who I think are led by King Arthur, because, I mean, their leader is called Arthur, but it's never stated that it's specifically King Arthur. But I don't know who else it could be. Anyways, he manages to gain their trust by defeating a Deadite that was supposed to kill him, and they send him on a quest to retrieve the Necronomicon so that they can send him back to the present, because with the Necronomicon you can do that, because what can't you do with the Necronomicon? I don't know. I don't think the creators know either. That's essentially all the information you really need for the movie, though. Like, without the context from the second, I guess you'd be missing some details here and there about Ash and the Deadites and stuff. But for the most part, these movies do not require any kind of previous viewing to understand what's going on. Like, you can watch Evil Dead 1, obviously, need no information. You can watch Evil Dead 2, obviously, they retconned the first one, so you obviously need no information. And then you can watch 3, you'll be missing some shit, but they kind of give you a recap of 2 at the beginning of 3. Not to the extent that Evil Dead 2 does, but it's like a small recap. It's like a little 5-10 minute recap. So I feel like every movie just does not think that it could be part of a franchise. Every one of them wants to be standalone, and I can kind of respect it. Ash is also much more involved in this movie compared to the previous two, where like realistically he didn't have much of a character in the previous two, especially the first one. He was closer to a silent protagonist more than anything, and in this one they actually allowed Bruce Campbell to, act, which I'm still not sure was a good idea.
Emotional damage!
Let me stop you right there. I don't mean that in the sense that Bruce Campbell is a bad actor necessarily, but more in the sense that Ash is like a selfish asshole for most of the runtime, and he's low-key just kind of unlikable. He comes around at the end, but damn, like, I get that you don't want to be any part of this, but neither do the people you're helping. And it's like, you don't want any part of this. You were kind of thrown into this. Are you going to deal with the consequences or not? Because you can't realistically think that you're going to get sent back to your time and that nothing is going to have to be done about this. Obviously, there's going to be consequences based on the actions that you took in the previous movie. But overall, though, it doesn't really affect my enjoyment of the movie. I think him being a dick is actually kind of funny for the most part. The way that he goes about it is kind of funny. But I'm just saying, there is plenty to like about this movie, if I'm gonna be honest. Like, yes, it still has the same problems as the previous Evil Dead movies, which boils down to the movie just not really being all that good from a storytelling point of view. But they're all just so fun, and each new entry gets more and more fun, or more and more interesting at the very least. So in the end, it barely even matters. They're entertaining, even if they're not technically amazing, right? The stories might not be the most fleshed out things, the most clearly explained, but I don't think that's what it's supposed to be. Just like Ash, I think you're just supposed to be thrown into this like weird demon infested world where it's like, you don't really know what's going on. Ash doesn't really know what's going on. Everybody's having a good time though, so what else really matters? And even if I'm saying that it's not technically amazing, this movie has some great camera work. Like, it's not as impressive as the stuff done in the second Evil Dead, because that was something else, but it's still good, and there's more stop motion, which is always great. and also more green screen, which is not as great, but they don't overdo it too much, so it's fine. The makeup department also did their thing with the final villain, or spoilers, Ash's clone, because his face is literally like falling off of his head, and he looks gross, but so awesome at the same time. And speaking of his clone, I really enjoyed the final fight between the humans and the skeletons, because those skeletons were talking the most shit and got absolutely fucked. Well, kinda, but it was funny. And I can tell that they were having fun on set, just blowing up prop skeletons and running into them with the modified car, which... Can we talk about this modified car for a second? Who the fuck thought this was okay? Look at this thing. How did they even make it work? I don't know. But it looks great, and it worked, at least for the 5 skeletons that Ash killed before it exploded. Honestly, you know, the action in this movie, not the greatest thing ever. The dialogue in this movie, not the greatest thing ever. I don't know if there's anything in this movie that's the greatest thing ever, but it's just fun. And you'll watch this and you'll have a good time. I would say probably that this is my second favorite of the trilogy. I wouldn't put it above Evil Dead 2, no way, but I would put it over Evil Dead 1, because I think it makes more sense for this franchise to just not take itself as serious as the first movie did. I think Evil Dead just lends itself to being a little more silly, and the way that it's shot and the director, the type of movies that he makes and stuff, I think it just makes more sense for him to make slightly more comical, slightly sillier movies. My grade for Army of Darkness will be a 7. I personally haven't seen the 2013 Evil Dead, but I know it kind of goes back to full horror and leaves behind the memes, which I guess I understand, but it just kind of leaves a bad taste in my mouth because Army of Darkness had memes for days. So I just want to, pour one out for my skeleton friends.